Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Cleaning Lady, Season 3, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously, we're picking up in the aftermath of last episode. Audemars is gone, and they kind of skate over, the car went off the cliff, there were feds everywhere, but I guess it's technically you were able to skirt around that by just being witnesses, but I'm like, no, Russo would be all over this. There's no way she would just let you slide. So that's where I'm like, this plays into the Jeremy stuff. I also got some comments last episode. Other people are feeling it too. I don't really go online too much to check out stuff, so I'm sure plenty of other places on the internet have been feeling the same way I've been feeling about Jeremy being super suspicious. Once again, he's too amendable. He wants to, he's like, oh, I'm trying not to ask too many questions while, he's pretty are you going to tell me what's going on? But obviously, I know, he's trying to be too copacetic with everything that it don't sit right with me. You trying so hard, you're too much of a try-hard of being trying too hard at being a good guy in a situation. Oh, I know we were mixed up in some terrible stuff, but I'm not going to ask any question. Any normal human being, because even JD is kind of involved in all of this, but even he's asked questions. I didn't always agree with the way JD's handled stuff, but he's handled this to a normal extent because his family's mixed up in this. And Jeremy's he's just too wanting to be involved with Tony that I'm like, you're suspicious as hell. You read more like a Fed every time. Because something that comes up this episode is well, who called the Feds? Was it Nadia? And I don't think it was, but she seemed like she had as Ramona puts it, only 3 people knew the locations. Dante, Ramona herself, and Nadia. But it's would Nadia have called them in? Would she have made that call earlier? Because she was at least on the phone, we know, talking to Tony, but we don't know if she could have set up the FBI thing well in advance or not. Because who else would have motive to do it? Because Tony definitely didn't call it the Feds. She didn't have time to. She wouldn't have, because it would have put Armand in danger. She now later regrets wishing she had probably gone to the Feds earlier. To be fair, you wouldn't have gotten a good deal because, once again, Russo's got just as much beef with you as she does Armand, because she blames Armand for Garrett's death, but she also puts that on Tony. She'd even told Nadia, hey, when it's all said and done, I'm going to arrest Tony too. She's mainly about Armand, but she's also about willing to take down Tony because Tony's been involved in this and you're the reason why Garrett died. So there's that. But it's just things about it just that, and him being suspicious, oh yeah, Jeremy being yo, let me put some cameras up. I'm like, what? Because there's no way he could have called the Feds while he was with Tony and Fee. But let's not forget, after he dropped him off to where Armand was being held, he left for a while. So he could have easily been in contact. He could have had his phone on he was doing the GPS thing, so he could have easily had them following them, but it's the Feds were there at the same time. So I don't know. I think Home Dude does still scream Fed or just something up with that dude. And because the moment he said, oh, let me replace the battery to this smoke detector, I'm like, ooh, perfect place to put a bug, isn't it? He's setting up all these cameras. Once again, he's maybe that's just the pessimism of the world, but it's also not just the world, but the real world, not just the confines of the TV show itself, but it's he, I said, being Mr. Too Helpful. He wants to help too much, and I'm like, you're suspicious. That's extremely suspicious, and because he's the one that convinced Fee to go to the sort of wake of sorts, the little gathering memorial for Armand. So it's kind of nah, there's something there. He wanted her out of the house, and it's just, I'm waiting for the reveal of it kind of makes you even scummier in the middle of all of this, because it's the Feds are the reason why that went super sideways. So that puts, obviously the people responsible for kidnapping Armand in the first place are the most responsible, but whoever called in the Feds kind of screwed the pooch on that. So like I said, I get the feeling Jeremy's being set up to be kind of the new Garrett, because he is pulling a little bit of Garrett. Garrett got to Tony and kind of blackmailed her to be a double agent against Armand, but then that kind of got turned into a triple agent situation back onto Garrett. But it's get someone close to Tony, very much like the Garrett situation, but without the knowledge of it. Well, if I remember correctly, didn't Garrett approach her initially as not an FBI agent. I believe they met under normal circumstances, and then he revealed himself to be one later. So maybe it kind of is kind of like a interesting repeat of that. I don't know. I might be misremembering. Obviously, it's been a while since I saw the beginning of the series. So, but either way, Tony's really going through it. I mean, everyone's going through it this episode. Like, obviously, I think Ramona and Jorge are handling it better than anyone. Like, there isn't the takeaway from their pain. They're going through it too, but Tony and Nadia are the people who blame themselves the most. They feel the most responsible because they loved Armand, and the inability to save him weighs heavy on them. Especially for Tony, it's like, Armand sacrificed himself to save me. Because for Tony, it's like, not only did she love Armand, it was clear as day they felt strongly about each other. They went through so much together over all this time. And then there's the element of all the stuff that we never got to do, all the stuff that I never got to say. Jorge was like, don't worry, I know Armand knew how you felt about him, but it's like, it's still like, you'll never know if he really knew. All you can do is hope that he did. But it's like, believing something and knowing something and hearing it aren't mutually exclusive. Like, hearing something and believing something don't always have to be like, hearing like, oh, how I feel about you, like, especially when she was deciding, like, right, I'm going to take this chance. The moment Armand's back, I'm going to tell him everything. She even said it while she was high on the devil's breath last episode. She wanted to say all that to Armand, and she'll never get a chance. But let's also not forget the biggest thing to it is that Armand also did for her something no one else. He was there by her side through it all with Luca. It's like, if it wasn't for him, Luca wouldn't be alive. Time and time again, he went above and beyond for her when it came to Luca. Even Jorge said, like, Armand always wanted kids. I'm surprised he never had any. And it's like, that's why he latched on to Luca so much, because it was almost like he was building a, like, he was having a pseudo family with Tony, which complicates things with your own marriage. But it is what it is. So, but yeah, like, Tony feels like she has a debt that she could never fully ever repay to Armand. Like, he had given her so much in the form of his help when it came to Lucas. Like, my baby boy is still alive because of you, so I'm always going to be indebted to you. So she decides to go to the, like, ceremony, even though, like, you probably shouldn't, because even Fee's like, Ramona's going to be looking for someone to blame, which she is, because she's like, cool, so why did the feds show up? Was it you? Was it you, Nadia? Which Nadia was like, no. Like, I was on the phone telling Tony what was up. But I thought it was super suspicious as hell that at no point during that conversation did Nadia bring up, well, Tony was saying that Dante was responsible. But I was like, maybe even she's kind of pulling a little bit of a Tony here and not being able to tell who she can trust, whether or not she can trust Jorge or Ramona either. Or is it just because, as she kind of says it later on, it's more like she doesn't believe Tony, so that's why she was like, oh, that was just Tony saying shit, I don't believe her, so, like, I'm not even gonna entertain that idea by bringing it up to Ramona and Jorge. So, but like I said, a lot of stuff comes to the surface. I figured Isabel was going to show up just because they recapped her at the beginning, which I'm like, wow, we have not. I think the last time you saw her was her wedding, wasn't it, or was it? Because didn't she take over the club for a little while for them back in season 1, I think, if I remember correctly? I think that's the last time because the last time we also saw her brothers when their father shipped them off in season 1. So, yeah, because I don't think he ever popped back up into the story, especially like when his dad was murdered in prison in season 2. Wasn't that season 2? Because it's all kind of blurred together. I'm pretty sure it was season 2. Yeah, I think it was like earlier in season 2. It turns out that Armand had left her that car that he had pulled out, the one we got introduced to last episode, a little toy car, and the significance behind that. And that car was given to her, and she actually forgotten about it until these recent events, and she gave it to Nadia, being like, yeah, he would, it needs to be here. It's like they both loved him. It's so interesting because Nadia can recognize Isabel's love for Armand because it was in the past, whereas like Tony, it's like, no, you screwed things up between me and Armand. Like, the fact is, here you are with your wild accusations that could get both of us killed, but also it's like, this is all your fault. Like, the time I could have had with Armand, we were too busy fighting and arguing because we were in a good spot. I thought we were good until you came into our lives and ruined everything. So Tony already feels guilty enough about Armand, and then on top of that, it's like, right, I loved him too, but it doesn't take away the fact is, you were his wife, and I did kind of get in the middle of it. Was not my intention. I I did kind of forget also, like, when it comes to Armand and Tony, it's not even just about Luca either. Armand saved her life. If he didn't kind of force her hand into, because Hayek's son wanted her dead, so Armand's the one that saved her life. Once again, it's just compounded of like what she feels like she owes him so much more than she believes she would ever be able to pay back in a lifetime type of situation. I mean, and it's even more heartbreaking when they kind of show you like those flashbacks to previous episodes, like, you know, him giving her the job of a cleaner, their time together, these moments they had, these intimate moments, like him saving Luca's life when she like barged into the place with Luca in her arms, and it's like what he did for her, you know, and Luca. So I thought it was an interesting development where we find out that Dante and Ramona are a couple. I was like, interesting, because once again there was that line from Dante last episode saying, "I know how much this means to you." So I was like, once again, why? Once again, why does it mean so much to you? We'll get to the reveal about all that later, but I thought that was interesting because now even Tony's like, cool, I know Dante's partially responsible, so there's only two possibilities. One, either Ramona was so blind to what Dante was up to, or they're in this together, which Jorge didn't want to hear that. But that was kind of my speculation of like, could Ramona be behind this? And we find out this episode, turns out in fact she was, because Marina, the name that was written, the word that was written that Tony found, is actually one of Ramona's name. Her name is Ramona Marina. So she is in fact responsible for this. And that's where I'm wondering, is this in fact, this is like, I don't think she wanted things to turn out this way. I do go back to my initial theory. I think she orchestrated his kidnapping because, one, either she, by the time she kidnapped him, she didn't realize, oh my God, it's my nephew, and then she came up concocted this whole plan after already kidnapping him to orchestrate all of this, and so that he'd be indebted to her, or that was the intention from the very beginning. You knew it was Armand. Like, it makes me wonder, like, when Armand and them crossed paths with her cartel previously, did she already concoct this plan even back then, and she's just waiting for her opportunity to strike, and it happened to be now? Now, what I thought was an interesting development we got this episode, and it's something I think I had posited before too, was I think Ramona's sick. I think that's why she was so desperate to get like Armand and Jorge like together, and why she's so adamant about the business kind of being run a certain way. I think she's sick. Because we see it multiple times. There's one moment where she was kind of standing up and she was kind of acting like she was dizzy. And then one time, like, she was, like, leaning against the bar or something, and, like, her hand was shaking. And Tony noticed it. Tony is a doctor, so she'd be able to pick up on that stuff. But I'm sure she's going to need more signs. But it makes sense. When you're in a powerful position as the leader of a cartel, you don't want to show any sign of weakness, because that's when the sharks start smelling blood in the water, you know? So that can be an issue. You never want to present weak in front of anybody. So maybe it's not even a sick thing. It reads like she might be sick. I don't know, but like I said, Tony did catch a little bit of it, but I think like with everything going on, she wasn't. I mean, it's like a trembling hand, and I don't know how much of a view she really got of it, but it's like, as a doctor, she will probably be the first one to pick up on some of those signs. But ultimately, Dante, I wonder what his plan was to do with Tony. Like, he dragged Tony to like a secluded place. I don't know if he did that because like Jorge and Ramona had told him to do that, because they showed up and it didn't seem like Dante was shocked they were there, so he was probably giving orders to grab her. Because I was about to say, like, were you thinking like, oh, you're gonna kill her out of like, oh, like, obviously he knew something was up, so either it was a thing of, oh, I'm willing to sacrifice myself to protect Ramona, or even he wasn't aware she was about to do what she did, because she's the one that shot him and killed him, not Jorge. So, because even at the time you're like, yeah, it definitely feels like a maybe covering up your tracks type of situation, but even more so now, because now all suspicion falls on, yep, it was in fact Dante. He was the one arrested with dragon's breath in the car. That was what was used to kidnap Armand, so it seems like an open shut deal. And obviously Jorge's not going to believe anything about, like, no, you're not going to convince me that my sister was, like, responsible for any of this. It's like, no, you're not going to convince me of that. You know, that's why he was telling Tony, like, yo, be careful. I've given you a lot of leeway, but be careful, like, how you broach this situation. So Dante is dead, but with him goes potentially any answers he could have given. But like I said, the reveal is that Marina is Ramona, so she is definitely responsible for all of this. It's sad too, because I was curious whether or not Armand's parents were going to show up, and they do, but Eduardo has beef with Ramona in multiple regards. We find out, in fact, he actually wanted Jorge to stay, but Ramona's the one that took him. So it's like, right, like Eduardo, it's like, right, she corrupted your heart, like here you are, like all you care about is like that blood money and stuff, but it's like, I wanted you to stay, I wanted her to stay away from my son, and it's like, who knows, like, you know, maybe, like, she's always been a part of the criminal world, and for Armand to end up down that path, to be fair, like, we kind of learned early on why he followed Hayek, but, you know, maybe in the end, that all kind of stemmed from secretly trying to follow in Ramona's footsteps, that he always admired her and looked up to her and loved her. She was like, you know, kind of she was the cool aunt. She was the one that kind of swayed him to the dark side, essentially. So he was always enamored probably by that world subconsciously because of her, and it kind of did lead down this route. So, but obviously, it's not the time to be having all this beef. Like, all the family drama is, like, rearing its ugly head, and Nadia had to be the one to shut it down. It's like, this is supposed to be for Armand. He was a good guy that deserves, you know, there should be a time of respect, and here you all are fighting amongst each other. And Tony's just sitting there kind of like taking it all in, because I think it's just, you know, the people that are around Armand who cared about him, sadly, are here fighting amongst themselves instead of just honoring Armand. You know, I mean, there's a lot of pointing fingers. Jorge tried to point fingers at Nadia, who ended up having to burn that any evidence tying her to Russo. Like, Russo had given her a card, it was in the safe, and burned it, just as Jorge had showed up. Luckily, she was able to distract him with a picture like Luca had drawn and given to Armand. It was also in the safe, which was kind of like an extra reminder for Nadia, just like, man, like, you know, it's something her and Jorge had an interesting conversation about, because when his significant other died, his daughter's mom, I don't know if that was like just a significant other, partner, girlfriend, whatever the situation or wife situation it was, but he talked about, like, right when she died, all he could focus on was, like, right, all the fights they had, like, all the bad stuff instead of the good stuff. I mean, that's, you know, and it's just that thing of, you wish you had more time. All the time you spent fighting, you wish you had done something different. Especially because, like, Armand and Nadia were pretty much at each other's throats a lot last season, so that's why it cuts even deeper for her, of, like, all the mistakes. It's like, I would have given anything in this world to bring him back and have saved him, but I couldn't. Just like Tony feels that same with that guilt, and, you know, the whole conversation of wishing to burn down everything in that anger and that sadness. When it came circling back to Dante's body really quickly, it was up to, after they grabbed Dante's body and dragged it away, it was up to Tony to clean it up. But Fee had snuck in trying to get to Tony and saw her being taken away by Dante. So she had gotten a hammer ready to attack, and then, you know, Ramona and Jorge showed up and dealt with it. But it is kind of interesting how it's all coming full circle, like, you know, especially with all the stuff with Armand, but then you add in a situation with Fee. It's almost reflective of, hey, Tony being in the wrong place at the wrong time type of situation, and pretty much in the same boat where it's like, hey, if they caught you, regardless of our relation, they would have felt like you would have been a hindrance and too much of a liability. They would have killed Fee if they found her. So Fee, because of the whole conversation with Jeremy about, he had talked about his dad working construction, and when the towers went down, him and a construction crew he put together went in to help people, but some of the support beams came out and they were trapped. And he's like, my dad was that type of person. It's like, either you kind of like wish someone luck and you send them on their way, or you jump into the fire with them. And that's the type of father he was. And for Fee, it's like, Tony would go through hell and back for me. I know she would. And so Fee wants to take that deep dive too. Granted, she gets more than she bargains for when she's caught up in this, but she decides to help out Tony clean up the mess. And Tony was going to walk away. Like, the only reason why she was mixed up in any of this now was looking for Armand. And now that he's gone, she has no business with the cartel until she finds out about Ramona. And it's like, I'm not going to let her get away with it. I couldn't save Armand, but now I can get justice. I can get revenge. Make sure anyone responsible for this is taken care of. And Fee's just like putting her head on the steering wheel, because it's like, every one step you take one step out, you take two steps in, you know, because Tony's getting dragged deeper and deeper into all of this. So, but Jorge is also taking that news from Eduardo and as well as Armand's mom about the whole news of, oh, like Ramona kind of just took you with her. And I don't know if that was just supposed to be a setup of like, right, we're like going to make it seem like, I don't know if they wiped out some other competition, or maybe those are people connected to Dante. They killed all of them, burned down the trail. I don't know what the direct correlation, maybe that's something I missed in the dialogue. Like, I don't know what that connection was, like what that setup was with Dante, but I don't know what that necessarily was all, because I thought at first, I was like, is that him lashing out because of what he heard about Ramona, or what? Like I said, now those are people that are connected to Dante, and maybe they found out the people he was connected with that had something to do with Armand's kidnapping, and that was you torching everything, and maybe it was meant to be a sign to anyone that tries to come after you. I don't know. There's even the ending of the episode, which is also extra sad, you know, obviously not even, you know, obviously just the driving off thing. It's like, Jesus, like I said, I went into this season knowing this season was going to be depressing, but it's just like, oh boy. Especially with like Tony giving, because like he couldn't, Luca wants to take like his, like a fire truck to show and tell, but he couldn't find it. And even that line from Tony of like, yeah, sometimes like things, you lose things and it's okay to be sad, which is so interesting considering like Fee was telling her to feel the sadness and she handled it the best she could, where it's like she never has been the type of person that just likes to sit. She can't. There's just some people just don't operate like that. Some people I need to be doing something. It's the only way I can handle things. It's the only way I can keep sane, you know, during all of this. And so the car she had gotten of Armand's that was at the funeral or the memorial, she grabbed it and gave it to Luca and told him to take care of it. It's like, right, it's kind of sad. It's like, oh, you remember the guy that took you to Mexico and so you could have your surgery? He's like, oh yeah, the one on the plane. And it's like, yeah, you know. And it's just like Luca will probably never really fully know all that Armand did for him and stuff like that, but Tony will, and she'll probably always want it remembered what Armand has done. So the good guy he was, because all this stuff about Eduardo's talk about, like, that's why Tony probably was also disappointed too, because like, here you are talking about all the stuff about Armand being this and that. It's like, yeah, he had his complicated things. Yes, he was a criminal, but he was also good-natured and good-hearted, because I know, because my son's alive because of him, because of everything he's done. So some very, very interesting development. There won't be an episode next week, but there will be one the week after next. Because I think I was looking at it earlier, it's like 12 or 13 episodes this season, I believe. So obviously we're like, we're already at the past the like halfway point at this point in time. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the next episode has in store for us and see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.